Welcome to the Right to Ignite podcast, where we talk to authors who are Let me try that again. Welcome to the Right to Ignite podcast, where we talk to authors who are writing to ignite the next generation with a heart for the Lord. I'm Kyle Morgan.
And I'm Brenda Covert.
Now, Brenda, I have a question for you. Are you ready to get sassy?
Yes, let's get sassy.
Let's get sassy. Our guest today, Laura Sassi, has been a teacher, homeschool mom, children's ministry director, and more. The author of multiple books such as the Tender Heart series, Faithful Feet, and her new book, Pumpkin Day for Boo and Belle. She writes daily from her home in New Jersey and finds special joy in sharing faith-filled messages of kindness, comfort, and hope at school visits, church gatherings, and other events. Laura, welcome to the podcast.
I am so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
I first discovered your work in the Clubhouse Junior magazine. I got it for my niece, and I was like, these poems are really good, and that one name just keeps popping up.
I discovered Clubhouse Junior when my kids were little, and so I just thought, oh, I'd like to write for them. So I started submitting poems to them, and I love writing poems for them. And even they often ask, "Oh, can you send a rhyming feature fiction?" So I'll probably try to my hand at one of those again this year. But they're a wonderful, just exactly the what my heart is to point little ones to Jesus in a really fun and fresh way. So if you're not familiar with that magazine, I highly recommend it. It's great. There's like Clubhouse Junior for ages 4 to 8. That's sort of my sweet spot for writing. So that's what I've submitted things to mostly. But then they also have Clubhouse for ages 8 to 12, a little more sophisticated.
I was going to say, how important is magazine work for an author?
Well, I've heard different things. Book publication and magazines are really um, they're two separate beasts. So they're completely different sets of editors. Writing a picture book is very different from writing a magazine short story or a poem. That being said, for me, starting with the magazine writing was perfect because I started when my son was a baby, and then my daughter came along. So I only had very small snippets of time to write. So writing for those shorter pieces for magazines was great. And then back then, so I started doing that. Like my son's 24, so this gives a little time perspective here. So I started writing things when he was a baby. There were more magazines for kids back then. It seems like there aren't as many. So I don't know if I mean, for me, it was like really great. And I did that for years until I wrote a story poem that actually ended up in Clubhouse Junior in 2012 or 13, I think. But a friend said to me, Laura, this could be a picture book. And that's when I thought, oh, okay, well, maybe I'll try picture books. But so that was the transition for me. But I just don't know if I don't know if at that point it was easier to get something published in a magazine than in the picture book world. Although now I would say it's probably equally hard for both. Not to be discouraging, but you have to have a lot of patience.
That is true.
Yes.
Yeah. I know you have a background in education, so how does that influence your storytelling style?
So I was a history major. I majored in history, but then I went and I taught elementary school, and I got my master's in education right after college. And so that definitely shaped it because my favorite subject to teach, I taught fourth grade, was reading and writing. And so the stories they were reading were just so magical and wonderful. And I could see kids getting turned on to reading. And I'd always, from ever since when I was a little girl, wanted to write and loved reading and loved stories. So that was sort of how I started thinking, oh, well, maybe I can do this. So when they were writing an assignment, I might sort of give myself that assignment later and see if I could do it. So that was a nice transition. So I was exposed to a lot of great literature through that. And that's one of my tips for aspiring authors to pick whatever genre you want to do, whether it's middle grade or picture books or board books or magazine pieces. Go and read as many as you can. So Clubhouse, they did not have Clubhouse Junior, just to go back to Clubhouse Junior at my public library, but they did have um, highlights and cricket
Oh,
and spider and Jack and Jill. And I would go and I would check out 4 months of each of them and take them home. And they would keep them for me and read them and study what made it work, what was involved in a poem or a craft. And I did the same with board books and picture books. So yeah, so any of you teachers out there, you already have a bit of a head start because you are so into reading. And also, young parents, if you're reading with your kids, you also are off to a really good start. Or grandparents too, anyone that's sort of connected with books like that.
Yeah,
that's
I've
really
noticed there's a lot of children's writers that are teachers. And so you were a teacher, you're a mom, and then you also homeschooled your children. So you're coming at it from lots of different ways. Like, what's kind of the overlapping thing that you learned from all of that?
Well, and then I would add to that, then I also taught Sunday school, and then I was just for a handful of years, I was the children's ministry director at our
Oh, well,
small
there you go.
church. Even more at all. What was the common? Well, just seeing how kids respond and love stories. I mean, you sit down with your child with a story, and they are engaged, and just the power of story, and then realizing, well, gosh. I can harness that power as a way to share about Jesus. And Jesus was probably the greatest storyteller ever. I mean, think of all the parables he told. He's a great, what a great, I mean, that's a great strategy. Even
Yeah.
Jesus used stories.
kind of touched on my next question. I was going to say, with the exception of my Tender Heart Devotions, which has 112 pages, all your other books have been picture books or board books. So you're drawn to the picture book, board book format because of your dealings with the younger children. So my question would be, how do you weave biblical truths like faith or kindness or grace into stories without sounding preachy? Because
Okay,
those,
well,
are always a turnoff. But
that's
I
right.
have I have at least I have at least three of your books. I've got other ones from the library. They are not boring or preachy.
So how to not be preachy? Well, and then I think you could use I'm a rhymer, so you could also say you don't want to be preachy and you don't want to be teachy either. You want the story to flow naturally. So this would apply to writing just wholesome stories that aren't even necessarily faith-based and have a faith message. So what's the secret to that? Well, your story has to have heart. The character has to be compelling. They have to relate on a sort of like a universal level to what this child is facing, or what if you have an animal substitute, what this little owl is facing. One of my books has an owl in it. And then I think if you bring that story to the fore and it's about the story and you're not just plunking the message, the faith message on top, like you might plunk a cherry on top of an ice cream sundae, but you have it flow in it. Like I wasn't planning on an ice cream analogy, but
I
like
know, but
it's
now I'm
part of the
hungry.
story. Like if what's the good ice cream flavor? There's Rocky Road or something where it's all blended, and then it's not going to be preachy and teachy. And just don't end it with a sentence. You in a draft, often in a draft, I'll write what my message is. Very preachy, very teachy, but it's just a note for me. And then the part of the art of writing that story is to convey that without saying it, just in that lesson way.
So condensing that, how do you write a board book? Because condensing into a picture book is one thing, but a board book is even smaller. It's even shorter.
I know. I know. Well, that goes back to the question of, like you said, I'm drawn to picture books and board books, except for my devotional book, which is 112 pages. Um, I like that format because it kind of parallels a child's attention span. So you're getting a whole story in 32 pages or in 16 pages. So how do you condense it to that? Well, hmm. Well, I would say maybe there's some others out here. I'm an overwriter. Do you know what I mean by that? I
Yes.
just write, like it's just pouring out of me. I'll just write. And then I go back and I prune. And that's how you get it to fit. And you really have to do that with a board book. I tend to write in rhyme, and so that helps with word count because rhyme by nature, it's very, at least my rhyme, it condenses it just because of the format of the rhyme.
Yeah.
But my overwrite and then prune. And set it aside. I'll set it aside and work on something else and then come back and prune some more. But I don't get rid of it. I may prune it, but I tend to keep at the bottom of if I'm working like in a Word document or something, at the bottom, I keep all my outtakes. So my story might be five. I don't send that to an editor, but just in case I over pruned and I was like, what did I say? And then I can go back and retrieve it. But mostly I don't retrieve it. Mostly it was good that I pruned it.
Yeah, but it probably gives you some peace of mind to know it's there. I think
Yes.
that's a great idea to keep your
Yes.
extras at the bottom just in case you need it back.
Exactly. Yes. It does give you peace of mind. Right.
So, do you have some writing strategies for making faith accessible to the smallest of children?
Okay.
Because
Well,
I think some of the concepts are difficult for them to understand.
absolutely. That's a really great question. And there are also some topics that, right. So to make it accessible, one, I would try to maybe not pick the most abstract concept. So choose what you're going to be including in your story. And then I find metaphor is a great using metaphors, comparing something abstract to something real. So I like to use a lot of metaphors. In the devotions, that's one of in my devotion book, I really had to, that's 100, it's 50 devotions. So I took a concrete object and then connected it to a faith concept. So start with something concrete. Start with a concept or a story that is going to resonate with a child. Those would be my tips for making it accessible.
Sort of
Um,
like how Jesus did it. You tell the parable that everybody understands, and
yes.
then you link it to the actual message of what they need to learn.
Exactly. Once again, we're going back to our greatest mentor. You're exactly right. Yes. Yep. That's how we do it. And I also think when you can include, so if you're writing a story, include children in it. They like to see themselves, or
Yeah.
so try to think about their age and their perspective and include that in the story. And it can be I like to write a story where there's an owl, or my newest one has a chipmunk and a bunny, but they're really stand-ins for children. I mean, so it's like from their perspective. So I think those are things that make it accessible.
You said that you write in rhyme, and I wanted to ask you because I had toyed around with writing a picture book, but everything that I was reading, people kept saying, "Well, rhyming picture books are going out of style. You know, the trend is moving, away from that." Like, what have you seen with the trend of picture books? Because first of all, I don't think I could write it as well as you could.
Oh.
and so you're probably the exception where, it's done so well, it doesn't matter where the trend goes. But what have you seen over the years with that?
It seems to me there's still an awful lot of rhyming books that
Yeah.
come out every year. I think that rhyme is perennial. I think that every generation of child enjoys rhyme. And I think that parents enjoy reading rhyme, good rhyme. See, that's where I think that the editors make these pronouncements. Um, because I think they just see a lot of rhyme that isn't scanning, because it's more than just about the rhyme. It's also about the cadence, and you have to have the rhythm, and then it has to be consistent throughout, and then you have to have clever rhymes and not too many just ordinary rhymes, and then the rhyme can't drive the story. So you can't come up with a rhyme just because you need a rhyme that works there, and then that's so you have the character do that. So it's tricky to do. It's hard to execute. But I think that well written rhyme is always going to be in demand because for one thing, I mean, little ones learn through rhyme. They can hear the rhyme. When I go to school visits, they have so much fun guessing. They can then use that rhyme to guess what the word is, or they'll raise a little one will raise her hand and, excuse me, Mrs. Sassy, your words rhyme. And it's just, it's like they're hearing that and they're so excited. It's this discovery. So I think it's a great tool. That being said, I mean, I've heard from my editors even that rhyme, a disadvantage of writing in rhyme is that it can't be translated. So
That's what I've
often,
Oh,
heard.
if you're a publisher, when they acquire your story, might also be thinking, oh, well, would this be marketable? Is this easily translatable? So if it's not rhyming, it's much easier, obviously, to translate. And you can get some of the fun feel of rhyme without rhyming because you can play with some of the other elements that small children like. Well, you could have internal rhyme. You could have two words next to each other that rhyme. Then you're not going to have any trouble with like meter or anything. Or you can incorporate sound words. So you can do other things that give that playful feel of rhyme without having it rhyme. And it probably will be easier to have it get accepted.
yeah, that makes sense.
Just guessing. I'm not sure. I mean, that's what my feel would be from what I've heard. But
Yeah,
I think there will always be rhyme, but
I
there will
think so.
always be a demand for good stories.
Yeah,
That's
my
true.
nieces love the rhyming books. They prefer the ones that rhyme.
Yeah, exactly. And when I think back, like my husband, he remembers books when he was little and he loved Dr. Seuss. Well, those all rhyme. And one of my favorite ones when I was little was called The Duchess Bakes a Cake. It rhymed. So that was about a duchess she would rather read and write. So
Oh.
she's not paying attention to her cake, but and it's just interesting because then I grew up to be a reader and a writer. So was it because of the Duchess? I don't know.
Well, can you tell us what your path to publication was like? I mean, did it take
Okay.
a real long time, like it did for many of us, or what
Yes.
happened?
Yes, Brenda, it requires patience, doesn't it? Yes. So for me, as I said, I was a teacher. I started writing when my kids were little. So the path to magazine publication, that went pretty I started getting things published in magazines quite quickly. Um, I think my very first thing was a craft for highlights, and then once they liked one craft, then I tried to regularly send them crafts, and I tried to always have this idea of like a diverse portfolio. I always kept that in my mind. So I didn't send all poems or all crafts. I tried to my hand at different ones, and I made a little itinerary for it where I kept track of when I sent it and what the response was and when I got it back, and it was fun. That's what I started. That path was easy. The path to, or not easy, but easier than the path to picture book or book publication, as you know, is much more difficult because the publishers are just inundated with so many submissions. And I think this is more true in the magazine world now as well, that they can't possibly read them all. They go, or they do, but they go into a slush pile that you might have an intern reading it. So actually getting your work seen is much more difficult. So that aspect alone requires patience. But I would also say that it requires patience to develop, to hone your skill and to develop your voice and to not be in a rush to send something out, but to really take your time and to find a writing community. That's why I love that Write to Ignite, you're building such a wonderful community. Just even in the last few years, as I've watched you guys grow, I mean, can't you form critique groups now? Or like there's
Yes,
all
we can.
sorts of wonderful opportunities. And that is where I really felt like I really started to grow and blossom as a writer. It was through being part of a couple of critique groups and just that sharing of our stories where I would receive feedback, but then I would also give feedback. I learned so much, and I learned just as much from the feedback people gave me on my stories, or maybe more from the feedback I gave to other people, because it was somehow easier to see what was working, but also what wasn't working in someone else's story. Maybe because I wasn't as attached to the words, like something when it's your own story, you don't want to, oh, I really like that part. You don't want to change it. But in someone else's story, you can see, oh, well, maybe that I had a question about this part. But then also I also through the critique groups where you're getting multiple perspectives and feedback, you also realize that it's also so subjective. So,
Mhm.
Brenda, if you read one of my stories, you might say, oh, I really don't like that. I was confused by this. And Kyle, you might come up with a different thing that you were confused by, and, or a different thing that you liked. So that makes you realize, okay, well, it still needs to be my story. But then, when you get that multiple feedback and you start to see patterns like, okay, well, Brenda and Kyle both thought that was really helpful. Or in other people's stories, when I could see, because we would always see everyone's feedback. So it was that community. So the community, not being in a hurry, and just taking that time to hone my voice as a writer. That took a while on the journey. So now I forgot the question from it, but so what was the journey? So the picture book, but then from magazines to picture book, but from picture book to that process to getting that first publication was years. And the first book was a Goodnight Arc. I mean, I wrote it for 2 years. At school visits, they used to say I was doing other things too, but but I worked on it for 2 years, and then it was out on sub for a while, and then it was another one that was accepted. Then it was another 2 years till it was published. So, well, Brenda, like it's like so slow. You have to wait so long, but it's worth the wait.
Just when you think all hope is lost, you get a yes.
Exactly, exactly.
So you brought up author visits. I feel like author visits are so important, but with picture books especially, they seem to be even more important. Like, how many author visits do you typically do in a year?
Oh gosh. Okay. Well, remember how I said I'd like to have that little map with my strategies? So I set goals for myself with everything. So like in the fall, for this fall, I have my new book, Pumpkin Day for Boo and Belle. So I have a goal of doing between 15 and 20 events in the fall because
Wow.
it's a fall book. So
Wow.
some of those are going to be um, like a bookstore event. Some will be, my story is set in a pumpkin patch. So there's a church that has a big pumpkin patch out on the lawn. So I'm going to go there for that. So, uh, yeah,
That
so
sounds
between
fun.
15 and 20.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
And I'm planning them now because, especially like the school visits, the teachers and the school, they're all going to be on break on summer vacation very soon. So need to get those in place. But that depends on your availability if you can do that. I try to stagger them so that I still have time to write. Always have something in the pipeline if
Yeah.
possible.
I've heard that.
Yeah.
So what kind of walk through what an author visit does for the author? Because I mean, we know, if kids go, they get to, learn about a new story, they get to meet an author. But as far as like the business side, like how important is that as an author, or is it more of an outreach mentality? Like, what is your mentality with that?
Well, my mentality is an outreach mentality. I love connecting with kids. I love going into schools and maybe they haven't met an author before, and getting to be that person is pretty exciting. Um, it's also, I mean, on the publishing, the book side, I think it is important for just exposure for your book and getting people to know about your book so that they'll purchase it so that your your publisher will say, yes, this book is doing well. We want another one from you. So so it's it's like a balance between those things. So I always make a like a book order. I always provide a book order form. So and I say book orders are part of the fun. Now, I don't sell my own books, but I partner with a local bookstore. So then I
Okay.
feel like I'm also, it's like this great, I'm connecting with the booksellers. And so I know one year one of my books was the best-selling book she had, though she sold the most copies of that book in the year. And it was
Oh,
because
wow.
we did all the book events and she was the vendor for the book events. So it's a really great opportunity to connect with local booksellers and with your library and get them to ask them to acquire copies. Um, so yeah, I love sure you write your story and you're just by yourself, and it's like this sort of quiet contemplative thing, but stories are meant to be shared.
Yeah.
And so of course they're going to, when people buy the book and they're going to be reading it, they'll be sharing it with their child and it'll be this special thing, and I love thinking about that. But when you go into school visits, it's my chance to sort of interact in that special way. So I love school visits and church visits and library visits. I love them.
Yeah, and especially with picture books, they're meant to be read aloud. I mean,
Absolutely.
they're
Yep,
very much a communal experience. I mean,
absolutely.
maybe a middle grade chapter book, can be read, individually, but this is definitely something that's meant to be read aloud, enjoyed as a group.
I would say that a middle grade is meant to be that way too, because when I was teaching fourth grade, every day after lunch, I would read to them, and I read middle grade novels to them, and we loved it. I've had students that are adults come back and say, "Oh, I loved it when you read." They even remember what we read. So that was still a communal experience. I remember reading Summer of the Monkeys was always my favorite thing to read to them. It's by Lou Rawls. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. But at one point, I'm like, every year when I read it, I'd like be crying to get to the part. So like my students would run up with tissues for me, and it was just something just wonderful. So they're seeing when you do that wow, books have this effect. Story is powerful, and that's a really wonderful, wonderful story.
Yeah.
A faith message, actually, indirectly. It has that a wholesome, a good story, really good story.
Okay, so we were talking about your 15 to 20 in-person events planned in the fall, and so that's one way to promote your books. But what else do you do to market your books?
Okay. Oh, that's a really great question because I'm right in the middle of getting this set for my next book right now. Um, so going back to that like diverse portfolio idea that I had with my magazines, I try to do a variety of things. So I try to go have a blog tour. So I'm reaching out right now to different bloggers to see if they would like to have me, and I do a combination of interviews or maybe craft ideas, extension activities, uh, like any kind of inspirational post, something they might want. So that's part of it, and I try to reach a diverse assortment of bloggers. So my next book, Pumpkin Day for Boo and Belle, is sort of meets at that intersection of faith and mainstream. So it opens it to going to some bloggers that aren't necessarily Christian even, but are great about bringing stories into libraries. So doing like a diverse collection there. Now podcasts. I've really enjoyed podcasts. I always try to include a couple of podcasts. See if my see if there can be any like maybe a radio interview or a TV spot would be great, although those are quite difficult, I think. But just a diversity of those kinds of things. I also reach out to bookstores. So see, if you can have your publisher or just design your own some bookmarks that you could take, and maybe a one sheet that described the book, and you could take it into bookstores. You could plan a day of just stopping at different bookstores, and you could even offer to come back and do a signing. Once the book is out, one thing I like to do is call ahead if I'm going to be traveling somewhere and say, "Hey, I'm going to be such and such in a couple weeks. I'll come in and sign some books if you want to order a couple, and then come in and introduce yourself." So, sort of an eclectic assortment of things. It's a lot on the author these days. You've got to be creative, and I kind of have to guard my time and remember that, okay, yes, it's okay to do that, but I also want to be writing.
I've seen you dress for Easter.
Oh, yes. Okay. So another thing, I do like to, for each book, I do like to sort of either have a puppet or coordinate a costume. So yeah, I could have brought it, but I didn't. I have a big bunny hat for Bunny Finds Easter and has two big bunny ears coming out of it. But that was not actually my idea. I just had a little bunny puppet I'd made, but I did a school
Oh,
visit, a Zoom school visit with a school in Oklahoma. And the librarians there were amazing. And so they sort of was sort of a situation like this, but they were wearing bunny hats to interview me. And I thought,
wow.
I need a bunny hat. So as soon as that Zoom call ended, I went, I looked around my house and I found an old straw hat and I had bunny ears and I just glued them to the back. And then I went out and I bought carrots and an egg, like a little nest and all sorts of silly things. It's a big hit.
Do you want to grab that stuff?
You want me to grab the hat?
Yeah, I mean, why
Okay, I
not?
will. Okay,
Look
there.
at this hat. Bird's nest with eggs,
Yeah,
beautiful
bird's nest
flowers.
and carrots, carrots.
There they are. And
And
bunny ears.
oftentimes someone, well, a couple times, Mrs. Sassy, those aren't your real ears. They're confused.
They are. You paid for them. They're yours.
So there you go. There's the hat.
Kids are funny.
Well, you said that this new book, Pumpkin Day for Boo and Belle, is that right?
Yes.
There
Yes.
it is.
So you said that this is kind of a cross between, mainstream but also Christian. So what publisher is it with?
So it's with Paraclete Press, which
Okay.
is a Christian publisher. And so I would say like the general theme is wholesome and it's about Thanksgiving and it has a Bible verse at the beginning.
Okay.
It's it's sort of topped and tailed by a Bible verse, another Bible verse at the end, but the story itself doesn't have any outright Christian message. It's just a good message of friendship and forgiveness and thankfulness set in a pumpkin patch. So there's Boo and Belle have an annual pumpkin day tea, and Belle has invited Boo, but something has happened to the invitation and it doesn't arrive. And so he thinks he hasn't been invited, and she thinks that he's ignoring her, and they are very upset. And are they going to figure it out? What's going to happen? Will they be able to start anew and have forgiveness? You have to read it to find out.
Well, I hope so.
So, so that is a July 15th
Okay.
release. Perfect. So all ready for fall.
Yeah, perfect.
And that's why I'm
That's
trying to do pumpkin patch story times.
Yeah.
Be fun to
yes.
read it in the pumpkin patch. So I have one actual in the patch story time, pumpkin patch story time. So trying to do some more.
Oh yeah, that'll
Yeah,
be
that would be
great.
good. Okay, so I wanted to ask, what's something your readers might be surprised to learn about you? My connection is
Something
unstable.
something my readers might be surprised to learn about me. Hmm. Well, they might be surprised to learn that um, I am fluent in French.
There we go.
They might be
Wow.
surprised because I lived in France when I was little. And so that in French, everything rhymes in French, or almost everything rhymes in French because they don't have end sounds. And so I think my early love of rhyme came from French because really everything rhymes in French. So, and there's such a nice cadence. So I credit
That is
that with
really cool.
with my rhyming, with my love of rhyme.
I feel like that's a great title. Everything rhymes in French.
It does, yeah. Well,
I
it's
would
not
read
quite
that.
everything, but
Yeah.
large groups of words rhyme.
Merci, oui, oui. I just,
There you go, exactly.
So,
Oh.
what is something you wish you had known earlier when you started off writing? I know you kind of touched upon the critique groups and how that was beneficial, but is there something else that you're like, oh man, when you found it out, I wish I had known that earlier?
Well, I would say critique groups is a biggie thing, big part. Um, the other thing for me is I would say that I learned to. I would have probably, well, I think having an agent really helps. So I would
You have an agent.
say
Awesome.
yes, finding an agent has been very helpful. So I would say that that would be something that I initially didn't pursue, but then when I did, I was very happy that I had pursued it. So, and
How many books
yeah,
do you have under your belt
uh, Pumpkin Day for Boom Bell will be number 12.
when you do?
Oh, I didn't have a single book. I was having trouble getting any of my books seen. I didn't, Goodnight Ark was the book I was subbing at that point, and a couple others, and I was just getting crickets. But then I got an agent, and all of a
An
sudden,
agent.
ta-da! I had 3 offers on Goodnight Ark. The agent was the difference.
Wow.
And then I one
Wow.
of my books I
Wow.
sold on my own, Little You. I was between agents at that point, and that was great. But then I just realized the contract was so complicated, and there was like I realized how much the agent had negotiated for me, and I was able to do some of that on my own because I had been paying very careful attention to what she did. But there's the business side of it is it was helpful to have an agent and just to get it past the slush pile. So if people are wondering if that's for you, I would definitely consider getting an agent, especially if you want to go like the traditional publishing route with some of the bigger publishers like
Oh
Sonderkid.
yeah.
Some of those, they won't even look at anything if you don't have an agent. So
So
it's like a
so
vault.
Right.
what agency are you with?
I'm with Prospect Agency.
Okay. Okay. Nice.
There's a lot of good agencies out there. There's a lot of scams out there too. So you just have to be careful and ask around, ask your friends. The Society for Children's Book Writers and Illustrators was a great resource for me. And there's something called Writers Beware. There are different things where you can go and find out if an agent or a publisher, for that matter, is legit.
Yeah. So my last question was, who is another author, living today that you're just loving what they're doing, either Christian or the general market, that you're just like, oh, I love what they do.
Hmm. A current author who I love what they're doing. Um, well, I'm going to say this is an author friend of mine, Rebecca Gomez.
Okay.
I love what she's doing. She's a Christian author. Her books have been are mainstream, but she's done picture books and she's done middle grade. And something that I think that is really awesome that I love is she's always loved to draw. And so she, in the last couple of years, just every day was drawing and doing different things with words and images. And I could just see her sort of warming up to this as she kept doing it. And her sketches had ever increasingly good flow and everything. And she wasn't in a hurry, in a rush. Um, and so she has a middle grade novel out that she did a graphic novel. She did the illustrations for. And
Oh,
I just think that
nice.
is so amazing. So I would check her out as just an example of taking something, we all come, she started just like we did, I want to write a picture book. And she honed her skill. I think I'd like to try illustrating. And she honed her skill. So I think she's very inspiring. Rebecca Gomez.
I love that.
I'll have to look her up.
Yeah. Oh, do.
Yes. Well, I'll close us
Thank
out.
you.
You could win Laura's next book, Pumpkin Day for Boo and Belle. Laura was gracious enough to offer a giveaway. Here's how you enter. Send us an email to info.writetoignite@gmail.com. That's info.writetoignite@gmail.com. Or you can comment on this blog post on our website at writetoignite.com and you could be the winner. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you will tune in to the next episode. Keep writing and igniting those hearts for the Lord. Thank you so much, Laura.
Thanks for having me.